Back in August 2025, something brought one of the UK's biggest industrial giants to a complete standstill. And it wasn't a strike or a recession, it was basically a ghost in the machine. This is the story of the massive cyber attack on Jaguar Land Rover, a crisis that sent shockwaves from the factory floor all the way to the government. Okay, let's get into it.
Just think about it for a second. What does a silent factory sound like? I mean, a place that's supposed to be buzzing. You know, the roar of machinery, the hiss of robotics, the clang of metal. But what happens if you just turn it all off? What are you left with?
Well, for Britain's biggest car maker, that silence, it's not peaceful. It's the sound of an absolute catastrophe unfolding in real time. It's the sound of a company, and really an entire industry, just holding its breath.
So, the big question is, how does a giant like JLR just go silent? To get that, we've got to rewind to the moment the whole thing started.
The details are pretty stark, really. In late August 2025, hackers got into JLR's systems, and the company had no choice but to hit the emergency brake on everything. We're talking a global shutdown of all their factories. And the initial estimate, they'd be down for at least a month. The whole operation, just frozen.
Okay, but a cyber attack, as bad as it is only part of the story here. The real drama, the thing that turns this from a corporate headache into a cautionary tale for everyone, is what they were missing.
And to really get a handle on just how bad JLR's situation was, let's look at what happened to another huge UK company, Marks & Spencer. They got hit by a cyber attack too. The bill? A massive £300 million. But here's the thing, their cyber insurance covered most of it. Now JLR, they were looking at a bill just as big, maybe even bigger. The huge difference? JLR was facing it completely alone.
And this is the killer detail. I mean, you couldn't make this up. According to reports, JLR was caught right in the middle of negotiating their cyber insurance policy when the attack happened. They hadn't finalized it. They were totally, completely exposed.
And the result of that? A financial black hole. We're talking hundreds of millions of pounds in losses. An absolutely staggering number that, without that insurance safety net, the company had to swallow whole. A hit that could honestly cripple even a company that big.
Right, but a giant company like Jaguar Land Rover doesn't just exist on its own, does it? It's connected to everything. So this crisis, it didn't just stop at their factory gates. It immediately started a domino effect that rippled out across their entire supply chain.
Now, to get why this collapse happened so fast, you've got to understand a concept called just-in-time production. It's actually a super efficient way to build things. The idea is that parts show up at the factory exactly when they're needed for the assembly line. It saves a ton of money on storage. But, and this is a huge but, it means there's zero buffer. If that main production line stops for any reason, everything behind it stops too, instantly.
And because of that just-in-time system, the fallout was immediate. The second JLR's production lines went dark, all the digital orders to their thousands of suppliers just poof, they vanished. No orders means no work. No work means those smaller companies have to start shutting down their own factories. The entire ecosystem was suddenly teetering on the brink. And the impact was brutal and fast. Sources in the industry were saying that pretty much right away, 1 in every 4 of their suppliers had to pause production and start laying off workers. Think about that. A quarter of this huge industrial network just ground to a halt almost overnight. And you know, behind a statistic like that is the real human cost. This stopped being about corporate spreadsheets and became about people's lives. We're talking about 200,000 jobs. The livelihoods of folks all over the country who make the parts for every single car, all of those jobs were suddenly at risk. And that's the thing. When you have that many jobs on the line, what starts as one company's crisis very, very quickly becomes a national problem, and it lands the government in a really tough spot. Suddenly, this is the question facing the government. Who pays when a giant falls? Do you just stand by and let that whole supply chain collapse? Or do you have to step in? And if you do step in, how do you do it without just writing a massive check with taxpayer money?
So, they started looking at this pretty unconventional plan. It wasn't a direct bailout. Those are always really controversial. The idea was for the government to step in and use public funds to buy the essential parts from the struggling suppliers. The plan was to act like a bridge, keep those smaller companies going, and then once JLR's factories were back online, sell the parts back to them. The hope was to do it all without the public losing any money.
So, when you take a step back from all the details, what's the big takeaway here? This one cyber attack, this one event,
really forced a national conversation. It became a huge lesson for everyone.
And honestly, this quote from the industry minister at the time, Chris McDonald, just nails it. He said, "What I really want this to be is a wake-up call to British industry." He saw it wasn't just a problem to fix. It was a massive warning sign, a moment where all the hidden weaknesses of our modern economy were suddenly out in the open.
Because at the end of the day, the JLR shutdown shows us this was never really just a story about cars. It's a story about risk in our super-connected digital world. It's about how critical it is to be prepared, and it's about all those invisible connections that link one single company to hundreds of thousands of jobs and even to the taxpayer's wallet.
And that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. In a world full of digital threats, where a few lines of bad code can silence a factory and threaten an entire industry, maybe the biggest risk of all isn't the attack itself. Maybe it's just being unprepared when it finally happens.